It's time for another unboxing, this time looking at a Messer from Krieger Historical Weapons. Hi folks, Matt Easton here, Schola Gladiatoria. So I don't do a huge number of unboxing videos, but I do them occasionally. I have literally been sitting on this package for 24 hours. I was super busy yesterday doing boring tax return type stuff. So I couldn't film this video, but I wanted to do it as an unboxing. I am super excited. I went to sleep last night thinking, oh, I'm really excited about opening this tomorrow. So this has been sent to me by Krieger Historical Weapons, who are based in Poland, Lodz, I think. And I'll put all the links below to their stuff. Check out those links. They make all kinds of stuff, okay, all types of mostly medieval stuff, but not only actually, they also do sabers and stuff as well. They do sharps, they do blunts, they do knives, they do all kinds of stuff. So they're making loads of stuff. And I have heard lots of good things, but I've never had one of their things in my hands. Now, they offered to send me something. So first of all, massive thanks to them for sending me essentially a freebie, but something that I'm very much looking forward to and hopefully will get used in future videos. It is, I believe, a Messer, aka a Langmesser, which if you're German just means long knife, but to anyone else in the world, you know it means a falchion-like knife-handled or knife-hilted weapon, popular in the 15th and 16th centuries. Now, before I open this, very briefly, the Langmesser is a particular type of knife-handled sidearm sword that seems to come about at the end of the 14th century. Okay, they don't really, there's kind of precursors perhaps where they come from which go earlier than that, but really what we'd call a Langmesser comes around right at the end of the 14th century and into the early 15th century, and they don't really become common in art or even archaeology or for example in fencing treatises until a little bit way into the 15th century. So they're really weapons, they're often regarded as civilian sidearms, but they were absolutely carried by lots of people in war, and they've basically got fashionable. So fashion sometimes trickles down from above. What the king's wearing is what the nobles want to wear, but equally sometimes the common folk in the street come up with some new fashion that rises up the ranks as well. So much so that by Henry VIII's time, you see him wandering around, and Emperor Maximilian as well, wandering around with Langmesser. So wherever they came from, whatever social kind of position they came from, they ended up being worn by everyone or carried by everyone, civilians and soldiers, peasants, at least the peasants who could afford swords, through townsfolk, burghers, all the way up to royalty and emperors, in fact. So, without too much more waffle, let's get this package opened. I should also mention as well, this came to me by UPS. I will talk a little bit more in the future about shipping and swords into the UK. Obviously, it's only interesting to the UK folks, but it is useful. I am finding UPS becoming slower and slower. I recently had something delivered by EMS, and that was incredibly quick. So I might be looking at other options. This wasn't held up due to any of the UK laws. It was held up due to customs delays, essentially, to do with Brexit, ultimately, because this didn't have the correct import code on it, so I had to provide all kind of codes and stuff. So it got a bit held up and delayed. So I'm super excited about opening this now. So let's get opening. Seems really well packaged. I like the nice fragile sticker on it. Using my trusty Open L, incidentally, which is my standard work knife, largely because it's really easy to sharpen, and I cut through a lot of stuff that blunts my knives, so I have to resharpen things quite a lot. And if it breaks, it gets damaged, it's easily replaceable. This is well wrapped, so it's inside what feels like polystyrene actually rather than cardboard, but we'll see, maybe it's both. And yeah, shipping swords into the UK these days is not the easiest thing in the world, partly due to Brexit, so there's more, you know, stuff from the EU we now have to pay tax on, which we didn't have to do before, and that also introduces delays, because it means that they have to calculate the tax and charge it to us before they deliver the package. There we go, that's the outer coating. So it is cardboard, and I can see how it opens more conveniently now. There we go. So yeah, Krieger historical weapons, check out the links below. They have been lovely to deal with, very, very nice. And I'm actually planning to go out to Poland in the not distant future, so maybe I'll meet up with them at some point. That'd be good to do a tour of Poland. Oh, so I got to choose the model, and I got to choose the colouring as well. I can already, so this is a Langmesser in a scabbard, and it should be sharp. I believe it's sharp anyway. I was actually hoping, so you know that I was recently at the at Tewkesbury, and I was kind of hoping this would arrive before that, so I could take that down there for people to look at. But unfortunately, at that point, it had arrived in the country, but it was still stuck in customs. So, it's pretty well wrapped up. I tell you what, I might. Oh, there we go. It was the Nuggle, holding it in. Oh, that's pretty. That's very pretty. Right, here we go. So, ASMR bubble wrap. If you like the sound of that. Look at that. It's got a knuckle bow. Hooray, a civilized sword. So, before I unwrap the rest of it, just to say, so you can see here the hollow rivets, or hollow pins rather, going through the tang. So it's a hidden tang, it's not exposed at front and rear, and this was one way of constructing knives and Langmesser at this time. So it's a hidden tang with rivets going through it to the side. You'll also notice a rivet there, which is the nuggle, which sticks out at the side here, that protects the side or back of your hand. And that goes through the tang as well. So it's a very solid construction. You're rarely going to get a loose guard or anything else, because this is attached to the blade in multiple points. So it's a very tough construction. Knuckle bows, obviously they existed in antiquity on things like the falcata, but with that example aside, these in the medieval period, we don't really see knuckle bows until the 14th century, when they start to appear on certain types of falchion. Now in England, Langmesser is clearly German terminology. In England, this would have been called a hanger. Now, in the past, I've actually said various things about these being fundamentally German or German influence, a German kind of Holy Roman Empire sphere of influence weapons. However, I'm going to backtrack on that slightly. I have since become aware of archaeological examples of knives and swords in England and France. Certainly France, obviously it's next to Germany, but even in England and the Low Countries, and obviously the Low Countries also, Flanders was also influenced to some degree by both France and Germany. But even in England, with projecting side bits, and in fact one of the swords I've been studying at the Royal Armouries, and more about that soon, has got a projecting side thing. Now later English swords, this actually seems to evolve into a bar, but we've decided on the earliest examples it's probably just a lug rather than a bar. So this side bar is something very much associated with this type of sword, usually single-edged, usually shortish, sidearms that we could call big knives, short swords, hangers. They were known as falchions as well. Now, just a brief comment on falchion versus Langmesser. What's the difference between a falchion and a Langmesser? The main difference is language. The main difference is that falchion is from French, essentially falcon. It's sometimes written in English as well, faucon in 14th, 15th century English sources, and Langmesser is clearly German. Now, not to say that there aren't different types of weapons. You know, in Italy they're called the storta. We would say, oh, well, that's a type of falchion more than a Langmesser. But we're really talking about details of design here. They are related weapons to some degree. What most people will point out is, oh, a falchion has a sword-like hilt, sword-constructed hilt, and a Langmesser has a knife-constructed hilt. Whilst that might be a general thing that you can say, there are weapons which cross over both and have a feat in both areas due to the way that they're built and their design. So let's get the rest of this bubble wrap off the scabbard. It's a lovely little, oh, I love the size of it. So amazingly, they do, you know, they do everything. They make the weapons, the scabbards, the belts. So I've got the whole setup here, and oh, look at that. That's nice. Oh, they've put some wrapper around the end of the belt. Oh, that's really nice. That's a very nice, so end of the belt. I've forgotten what that's called. My brain's gone blank. Really nice supple leather. Nice soft veg tanned leather. And I imagine there's a buckle inside this one that's wrapped up. I don't want to just yank it in case I damage anything. He says, then proceeding to yank it. There we go. Sometimes you just got to yank it. Yeah, the buckle's well and truly wrapped inside there. I really like how, so for those of you who don't know, 15th century men's belts are narrow. Okay, not always, there are some exceptions, but generally speaking, narrow belts were the fashionable thing for most types of belts. So a lot of time bad replicas use belts that are too wide. I can't quite get that off while I'm doing this, so I'll do that in a second. So lovely, what we've got here is a full, and it's wrapped around, as was often the case, wrapped around the scabbard. We have got a full knotted and ready to be worn belt assembly with the scabbard. My gosh, that scabbard's beautiful. So it's wood lined, wood core, and you can tell that the slats are quite thin. It's you know, historically they weren't big chunky things, and I love the fact that you can tell that it has a wedge cross section because you've got this thick spine at the back and then it narrows towards the edge here. Beautiful size. In fact, if anything, I'd say for me personally, the grip is quite long actually for a one-handed grip. But of course, Langmesser often have very long grips and they can be used for hooking. So you're certainly not going to have any. I mean, I've got reasonable sized hands. I'm not a small-handed person. So I think anybody with any size hands is going to find that easy to grip. And what I love, straight off the bat, is that the pommel section, the butt up here, the butt's quite big, quite thick. It's a thick butt, and it tapers down to really thin where it meets the guard, so it's the same width as the guard. And I absolutely love the ergonomics of that because, first of all, because it gets thicker towards here, it stops your hand sliding down, especially on what's otherwise quite a smooth grip. And you've got this kind of bird's head hook here, which is, again, is very iconic, very typical of this type of sword. But it means the edge alignment. I mean, indexing the edge is never going to be a problem. I've spoken recently about indexing the edge on something like a Burmese or Thai Da with a round grip, but this is a completely flat grip. So your hand is going to be have no issues whatsoever knowing which direction that edge is. And having a knuckle bow, I mean, honestly, in this period, knuckle bows, as I say, first appear in the medieval period anyway, around 1400, a little bit before that, but they seem to be most prevalent on this type of sword, on, you know, falchions, Langmesser, hanger. And just think of what a great thing that is in a place where you're maybe an archer or a billman, whatever, gunner, crossbowman, and you can't wear gauntlets, or you don't have gauntlets, you don't want to wear gauntlets for whatever reasons. Having a knuckle bow, which of course we get on later sabres, is just such a cool thing. And also, it can change slightly how you use the weapon once you've got a knuckle bow. You can do things with a little bit more security and safety, certain types of parries, certain types of guard position, that you wouldn't necessarily want to do with a simple cross hilt. So, let's unsheath it. Oh, that's cute. Oh, look at the distal taper on that. That is nice. Oh my gosh, that handles like an absolute dream. Yeah, so I'm just looking along the edge. It all looks straight to me. The finish is satin finish. It's similar to something like an Albion. Let's just put the scabbard down for a second. It is a straight blade, incidentally, which gets past the UK's import. That's actually one of the reasons why I chose this model. I do like the straight ones. I possibly would have chosen a curved one if I didn't know it would just get delayed for ages getting past border force. But this is a straight sword. So if you're in the UK and thinking about ordering one of these, make sure you write straight sword all over it, because there's no laws against straight swords yet. So in theory it should come sailing straight through, but make sure that they put the import code clearly, because that's what delayed mine. But yeah, so the point is pretty much, it's almost spear pointed, so there isn't an edge on the back, there isn't a false edge. It is a backsword in that sense, so it's completely blunt all the way up the back. But it's essentially a drop point, isn't it? If that was a knife, we'd call it a drop point. It is a drop point. But that means that the point is in line pretty much with the center of the axis, which does make it easier to penetrate. So if you want to get deep penetration, then this type of point is very good. A point that's asymmetrical and set towards the back, or a big clipped point, it's going to encounter more friction entering a target at a certain point. But this feels lovely. Oh my gosh. So as I say, the grip really adds kind of your feeling of, you can hopefully hear that, your feeling of where the edge is never going to be at fault, because it's essentially a flat grip up here where your index finger and thumb go either side of it. Putting your thumb up the back, a lot of people would think of that as a sabre thing. Absolutely shown with the Langmesser. If you look at Le Cookner, for example, lots of cuts given with the thumb up the back. So fundamentally, this is kind of a proto-sabre, isn't it? If you mostly what you do is sabre, like me, but you want to use a medieval weapon, like me, then you can kind of use this like a sabre. It wouldn't be necessarily exactly historically correct. In period, the guard positions you'd usually use passing footwork, and the guard positions would be more similar. Well, it would be Langmesser guard positions. One important thing to note, so this blade is single-edged. So those of you who want to be able to do a zwerchhau, for example, or twerchhau, however you want to pronounce it, you're going to be hitting them with a blunt, okay? So be wary of that, be aware of that. You could add a false edge to this, or you could have Krieger add a false edge to this, I'm certain. But as it stands, doing this on someone is only going to hurt them, it's not going to cut anything, okay? So it is principally a single-edged sword. A little bit like a Langsax, it has to be said. Now, in terms of the distal taper, so I mentioned that, it's I don't actually have my calipers with me, but looking at it, it's about 4 millimeters thick at the base, maybe 4.5, 5 millimeters thick at the base, and it tapers down a bit to probably about 3. Okay, so it's not got colossal distal taper, but bear in mind that this isn't a very long blade. The result is it's a very wieldable and quite stiff. Despite the fact it's quite a thin blade, it's quite stiff because it's not a long blade, okay? So sometimes when swords get shorter, you don't, some of the rules we apply to longer blades, they get morphed slightly. So the rules that apply to a knife are not the same as apply to a large sword, and this is somewhere in between the two. But my gosh, I really, really like this. We'll definitely be doing a little more deep look at this in the future and some cutting with it, but hopefully that's a first look, first impressions. And as I say, the scabbard is gorgeous, really good quality. Only thing just on the outside I would say that leather is glued at the back rather than stitched. I don't know if that bothers some of you. I don't even know what proportion were glued or stitched in period, but anyway, the decoration on the surface, the stippling and the sort of floral decoration on that leather is absolutely lovely, and the quality of the leather belt and the fittings. Yeah, so there we go. I've chopped the wrapping off the buckle. You can see it's a nice little 15th century style bottle with a plate riveted through, and the end to the it's focusing on my face rather than there we go. Yeah, they're really nicely, really nicely made. And this type of simple attachment I actually have on my Pinterest page, linked below. I have a section just devoted to simple simple belt hangings for scabbards, because I've noticed that a lot of replica ones, well, that hangs nicely. There we go. You can, oh, my bit too. There we go, you can probably see. I've noticed that a lot of historical art shows relatively simple attachment method like this. So this is one belt wrapped around and knotted, and that does the job. And a lot of replica modern scabbards have the most complicated and therefore expensive methods of belt hangers, but very often medieval scabbards were just suspended with one belt wrapped around and then stuck around the body. And that's why when you see in artwork, you often see, if I just simulate it here, you see swords being carried, and they literally just like that, just with the belt wrapped around and the sword carried in the hand, because people didn't want to wear their swords all the time. Very often they just wanted to carry them in the hand, and that would mean that legally as well you could travel with them, but when you got to your inn or wherever you're staying, you could put it down. They're not always convenient to wear, even a sword of this size. But yeah, that is an absolutely lovely hanger. Definitely one of my favourite medieval swords I own straight away. I absolutely love it, and I will be looking with hungry eyes at Krieger's other wares. So check out their links below. Thanks awesomely to Krieger Historical Weapons for sending me this. And yeah, like I say, check out the stuff. They've got loads of different stuff. They do blunts, they do feathers, they do sabres, they do all sorts, and loads of different sharp weapons. But I'm now really keen to see more of their product line. And oh, just before I go as well, just one interesting feature about the Langmesser's workshop. I've just noticed this is constructed. The guard, instead of coming up the tang and then being secured by the grip, actually comes down the blade. So the opening for the guard is as wide as the whole blade, and it comes down here and is then secured by that nuggle rivet there. Really interesting method of construction, very iconic sword, absolutely perfect, perfectly compatible with my period of reenactment clothing of the mid to late 15th century in my armour and all that kind of stuff. So I'm very happy. Oh, edge, how's the edge? Sharpish, could be sharper. I'll make that sharper. It is a sharp, but it lacks a bit of bite. So that will all come in the full review. But yeah, it's a fine edge, but needs sharpening by myself. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope that's been fun. I'll see you back on the channel really soon. Cheers, folks. Thanks for watching. We've got extra videos on Patreon. Please give our Facebook a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Cheers, folks.